a virtual platform for our next keynote speech in eTalks with Mr. Ishkaran Singh Bhandari. An advocate in the Supreme Court of India, Mr. Bhandari has worked in a number of infamous cases throughout his career. A prolific debater with a proclivity of turning tables over, Mr. Bhandari regularly appears in a number of national news and business channels for debates, some of which include Times Now, Republic TV, and India Today. Furthermore, Mr. Bhandari also aims to promote legal knowledge and political awareness through various social media platforms. Team EDC is incredibly glad to have Mr. Bhandari on board, and we hope that all of us congregated here are eager to get a glimpse of his body of work, endeavors, and all the experience that he has gathered throughout his career, which spans over 13 years. Mr. Bhandari, the stage is all yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Firstly, I would like to congratulate you for arranging such an event, which is very important in today's world, and the work that your team is doing. And it's my pleasure to address NIT Durgapur and the entire event that is being organized. So firstly, because something is very important, we need to discuss entrepreneurship, innovation, but why is it particularly important in India? That is what I want to cover. See, some of the things that you need to see in India is this. Of all the major economies in the world, we are the youngest. Our average age is around 28 years. Japan is 47. Germany is around 46, 47. USA is around 39. And not only that, UK is around 40, if I'm not wrong. So we are the youngest big economic power in the world. 65% of India is below 35 years of age. 50% of India is below 25 years of age, which is what I presume you all of you are. You are 50% of India. And it has been documented throughout history that innovation usually comes from the youth. Because when you see a problem with fresh eyes, either a problem created by the previous generation or a problem which the previous generation could not solve, you start applying your mind on how to solve it. Now, this innovation, and we are talking about entrepreneurship, and that obviously leads to economic growth. So I want to discuss why is this extremely important in the current scenario and how do we go about it. Now, economic growth can come and innovation can come of two forms. One is you create something absolutely new. The other is there are existing things, and specifically in the context of Bharat, I would say we are the oldest continuous civilization, and there is enough existing which, if utilized properly, standardized, marketed, that can also lead to entrepreneurship and economic development. So both are separate. Either you create something new. New would be what? When phone was created, or when a laptop was created, or when a steam engine was created, versus the other aspect of which I will talk about, giving a few examples of what already exists, but is it benefiting India? Is it benefiting Indians? Is it being monetized to the level that it should be monetized? And how do you go about monetizing it at the larger level? So those two different forms of innovation, I will talk with you. And why I want to talk about this is also because for economic growth, you need capital, you need labor, you need innovation. Now, capital, interestingly, no matter how much you have, is a limited resource. Even if you're worth 200 crores, that is a limited resource. X amount of it would be your house, would be your basic needs, would be your factory, whatever. Everything is limited. Labor is also limited. We are a very large population, but efficient labor is limited. And the factor of labor is increasingly coming down every decade when it comes to an output. We are going to machine learning, then AI, everything, you know all about that. So what is unlimited resource? The only unlimited resource is innovation, where there is no limit to it, where you cannot imagine what next you can create. In fact, if we were having this conversation in 1850, which we will not be able to have because you are sitting, I presume, in West Bengal, I am sitting in Delhi. If it is streaming on Facebook or YouTube, anybody sitting anywhere in the world can hear it. But supposing we were in 1850, and you woke up, or you came in 2020, you would not think you are on Earth. You had only seen, let's say, transport, an animal carrying a human, be it a horse, be it a camel, be it an elephant, be it any animal. And just 50 years down the line, you could see a car, a machine, an animal you probably won't recognize carrying humans. And if you were standing today, you would see some weird animal of all shapes, SUV to sedan to luxury cars, going zoom, 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 zoom. And in 10,000 years of knowledge you would have read, you would have never known such an animal existed. How would you know you are on Earth or you're on some other planet? I'm not even talking about aeroplanes, where you could not imagine that people could fly. Just a car. An animal you won't recognize, you would think, why doesn't it get tired out? How can it go so far? Or if you saw somebody sitting in London talking to somebody in India, you would think that is a superpower. Maybe some alien has come and that's some technology which aliens have invented. And in the history of humans on planet, what is 200 years? What is 100 years? Nothing. It's a blink of an eye. But in a blink of an eye, a person born in 1850 could not recognize 1950. Just a blink of an eye. If you died at 1850, I'm giving you an example. That is how much in just 100 years the world has changed that you probably don't recognize. And how do we know sitting here, you are very young, but how do we know sitting here, 2022, somebody who dies this year, if he comes down 100 years down the line, what would be the world? Would it be Earth as he knows it? Or would it be completely different, that it's some sci-fi movie? Would individuals be transporting themselves to any place in 2 seconds? How do I know? I'm not a science fiction fan, but what appeared fiction has happened, and I do not know. What I'm saying could also be less. Could be something, I could be traveling to Mars. Anything is possible. That would happen with innovation. But in Indian context, why is that important? Because innovation is an infinite resource. And India needs to concentrate on this infinite resource. And that is where all massive development occurs. We have a huge young population, which is an advantage, but it is also a ticking employment issue. It is also an issue of management of resources which we need to provide to people. It is also a reality that while we are one of the largest economies in the world, 5 kgs of ration still matters to people who don't have access to that. And all that will be solved only by economic prosperity, by lifting people out of poverty, and the onus is on people in schools, colleges to create that wealth generation where something developed in India is taken out. I want, and India's prosperity wants, steam engine is developed someplace, it leads to industrial revolution, or is a major contributor to industrial revolution. Communication revolution, phones, faxes, computers, internet, how it has changed the world. You see the biggest companies in the world 30 years ago and see the biggest companies in the world by market cap today. They are companies which didn't exist, which literally didn't exist, with technologies which didn't exist. Why can't that happen in India? A product, a technology where we're not reverse engineering, where we are not doing a version of something that already exists, where we create something which is an original creation, which then the world needs to adopt, because that is where you would have the big economic growth. Whether it be a thing like Facebook or Google, or it could be what Elon Musk is doing in multiple fields, or it could be smartphones. Whatever is the next jump, are we going to make a version of it, or are we going to make a new product which Europe, West, East, every place makes a version of? Because here, that is the route to being a superpower. And all of you who are starting off in your work life, that should be your dream. to create something which others need to reverse engineer, which others need to copy, which others need to create. And ask a hard question to yourself. What is the last thing in tech field that was created at a scale which is worth billions of dollars, which everybody else is reverse engineering? That is important. And we have the brightest minds. We have the best minds. And technology is still, in Indian business environment, one of the least regulated fields. In fact, technology has destroyed the need for a lot of regulation. I'll give you an example. This phone, the way we are talking, right? This phone in my hand. Now, this is a newspaper. This is a radio. This is a television. This is a marketplace. And I don't need any license in any of these. And not as a consumer. In this, I'm not a consumer of radio. I'm not a consumer of news. I'm not a consumer of what TV shows. I'm also a creator. I don't need a broadcast license to address. For example, my YouTube following is 5 lakh something. Facebook, every different platforms have different followings. I don't need a broadcast license from the government. Read Supreme Court cases of 1950s, 60s, 70s. Half the times newspapers were fighting with the government on some permission on newsprint, newspaper being available to them in sufficient quantities, because newspaper was a finite resource. So you needed licenses to set up a radio station, licenses, registrations for newspaper, licenses, registration for a TV channel. Well, for TV channels still it's very sometimes very difficult to get. Just a technological change and I don't need any license. If my content is good, if what I speak makes sense, then just having a phone in my hand and a reasonably cheap internet connection, I have bypassed government regulations, or anybody has bypassed. You did not need a license to broadcast this. Think in those terms of how much earlier businessmen had to suffer to get licenses, license Raj, versus where today those things are not even a problem you think about. That is how much technology has reduced the government's role, has given you an opportunity which is unmatched, unparalleled in history. Your phone. We have all read about those stories, somebody standing under a street lamp. We have heard of people who make very big in life who had to walk 20 kilometers to a school. Now, this phone, again, is the biggest library in the history of world. A basic smartphone is the biggest library of knowledge in the history of the world. Now, what do you make of it? Do you spend your time watching what X actor or actress wears, where they shop, how they eat, who had a fight with whom, or you use it to watch amusing cartoons, or you use it for furthering yourself, and I am a firm believer in furthering yourself, your family, your nation. The choice is yours, because the power and the technology and the access is with you. That is one part of it, where how you innovate, where you go, you can decide. Now let me go to what is also Indian and already Indian, which we miss out. I will just take one example, yoga. 1950s, 60s, yoga was derided. Today, all of you who have traveled abroad, go to the most expensive street anywhere in the world, and around it would be a yoga studio. Anywhere in the world. Because that's the in thing. The yoga industry is worth around 88 billion, and with its accessories, yoga mat, studio, all that stuff, is worth 130 billion. 130 billion. And they say it could be worth 300, 350 billion by 25. How many Indian billionaires in it? That's not something new. That's always been Indian. How many billionaires have set up from India? Have set up a yoga concept. It could be any form of yoga, X yoga, hot yoga, cold yoga. There are multiple power yoga, multiple forms of yoga. But who has, in a sense, been able to use it, a knowledge which has been Indian, which they tried to take away from India, which now people recognize as Indian. You have a World Yoga Day. But how many of Indians have managed to monetize it? And at what scale have they managed to monetize it? That's a question which, frankly, I believe needs to be asked. And why stop at that? Neem. I remember my grandmother doing with datun with neem, right? And neem was patented by US Department of Agriculture. India fought that case, India won that case. But now the world is going towards biodegradable products. World is going towards disposable products. World wants to travel light. And US is patenting various properties of neem. Research shows it's very good for gums, it's very good for teeth. Would we reach a stage where some foreign company with a branded neem datun sell it to India? We may well reach it, because we did reach it in curd. All of you in your childhood with your grandparents would have seen dahi with chini, would have seen probiotic uses of dahi, would have seen that my grandmother used to eat mango with curd. They process it, they standardize it, they sell it as yogurt at 200 rupees, 250 rupees above. What is it? Meethi dahi or dahi with fruit. And at good fancy locations, it's sold. Again, a product of India. And a product of India for hundreds and hundreds of years. But because it's being sold at 250 rupees, those kids who would not eat dahi at home or dahi chini at home buy it very happily. Yeah, obviously there is a contribution of standardization of flavor. But that's nothing, that's not rocket science. That's very, very basic. There is obviously marketing, which is also very basic. But we are waiting in yoga, in neem, in yogurt for external validation before we adopt it in India. None of these three products I have given you, and there are thousands of such products in India, require any great innovation, because you are talking about entrepreneurship. The first level I was talking about, electric car or teleportation or some technology or some process, that is requiring a innovative level in which you need to, some of you obviously have the talent, where you need to do something drastically different. The second part of using knowledge of Bharat, it is not really something very difficult. It's just the right idea. Creating an electric car, for example, was a lot of innovations and patents. All this is low-hanging fruit, is already available fruit. Why this? I was in Germany, you'll be stunned to know, in southern part of India, we have these big leaves on which you eat food. In any mandir in North India, pattal bolte hain, this green, if you are from North India, green leaf thali in which they serve you food. Any gurdwara, any mandir. And I once bought it because after I saw this in Germany, 20 rupees for 50 plates. In Germany, they are selling it as biodegradable. You're very obviously, it's fancily done, it's binded together very well, it's sparkling, it's clean, etc. They tell you it's biodegradable. They tell you your food is not touching an alien object, it's touching a leaf, you're having it on a leaf. And they are selling it for 7 euros or 8 euros, I've forgotten the price, one plate. That's 700 rupees, give or take. We have had that in mandirs. What is it to be done? Just a little bit of standardization. That the leaves are binded together well, packaged in a good manner. Or you will wait and the next generation will come and say, born China causes climate change, it's bad for the climate, the process to prepare it burns this blah, 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 blah. And your steel is bad because of this reason. So why don't you go hygienic? Why don't you go for biodegradable products? Why don't you eat in a labeled, stamped, green leaf plate made by some Western country? The examples are innumerable. The knowledge is there. Question is how we use it. Everything is in your favor. Age. The world has aging population problems. Age is big population is also a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. Because it's big population, there's a huge market if you manage to create something. Right? People need market to sell. And you have all these technologies, as I see it, already existing in India. And now you are in the age of, see, earlier ages, let's say even 100 years back, was the age of lack of information. You did not have information. Something happened in some part of India, even the administration sitting in the capital of that state would take a lot of time to get information. And those who had early information made a lot of advantage, let's say in the field of money. If the tea in India, some crop disaster occurred and you got to know it first in sitting in London, you would make a fortune. Or something happened to tea in China, you would make a fortune. It was who gets information first. And that was a decisive advantage because the next person could get it a few days late or a few hours late, depending on the time of history. Today, every information is on nanoseconds. If you were to sit here and find out anything in Japan, anything in Hungary, anything in US, not only US, in a state of US, in a town of US, sitting here, by the right search, you would get to know. So now we are not in an era of who gets information first. Now we are in an era of excess of information. There is information as to which celebrity ate what food, to which nation is fighting which nation, to what is the price of oil, to what is happening in the corporate boardroom of some big company in Japan or Germany or UK. So from what a singer is dating to what is happening to price of oil, everything is available at the same time. Too much information. Your skill set has to A, be on focus, what you focus on, and B, how you interpret and how you use that information. That is the challenge you have. Information is available. Resources are available. Innovation is the cheapest thing you can do. How you utilize it, that is the only challenge, and it's a very minor challenge. Because I do believe, and I will conclude by saying this, because I think you need to take questions, right? And I do believe that we today, if you reach middle class, live better than kings lived 500 years ago. You had to be the 1 out of 1 crore to live like a king, and then also the longevity of your life was much shorter than the lifespan of an ordinary, even less than middle class person in any reasonably decent part of the world. Life itself, you live longer than a king 500 years ago did. In extreme heat, you have AC and sometimes you might need to use a blanket or a chadar, which no king had access to. You have hot and cold water. I mean, we do very, very basic examples. You have indoor plumbing. You have hygiene level. You have health level, which kings didn't have 500 years ago. So it's a shocking statement that you, an ordinary middle class person, is living better than a king did 500 years ago. But you see on any parameter, life, health, resources, comfort levels, you will probably find it is all true. Plus, there is no risk to your life. You don't have to go to fight a war. So, in that scenario, it is truly Dickens, I think, who said it's the best of times, it's the worst of times. It is on you, how you make it. You spend your time wasting things, it's the worst of times. The world is moving very fast and you will be left further and further behind. Or it's the best of time with access to unbelievable levels of knowledge and technology and lack of governmental control or restriction in various fields, and you can make it the best of times. I hope all of you who are the young part of India, below 35, 65%, make it the best of times. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for the keynote speech. It was incredibly insightful, and I hope the audience had a lot to learn about the current economic stand of India, the importance of standardization and how we must incorporate it, and utilize the existing resources to propel our nation further. Now, sir, we have a few questions which will be directed to you. So the first question is, could you discuss the mindset with which you address every debate or panel? Meaning, what do you hope to achieve in every debate, especially when you know you'll disagree with the other speakers or panelists?
See, it depends on which part or which forum you are debating in. If you are talking about TV, as I presume you are, that's 30 minutes. Usually debate is 30 minutes. If it's 2 debates, then it goes to 1 hour. You have 3-4 minutes to speak. And the agenda is set by the editor of any channel that you go into. The agenda is set by the editor. So there, the purpose is to give what is your interpretation, in a sense, my interpretation, Ishkaran's interpretation of what has happened. And if it makes sense to people, that's technology. If it gives them some different perspective on what has happened, that serves the purpose. But there are better forms of debate and bigger forms of debate. Supposing, as I said, a YouTube channel or a Facebook. It's quite incredible to me. I don't know which video will get what views. I will come and speak. Sometimes it will, people will, that, and that's democracy also, and that is technology breaking barriers also. I speak something, it could have X amount of views or it could have 10X amount of views. But there you can do more. You can tell a perspective from a broader sense. And my purpose is, obviously it's very individualistic. I try to speak what I think makes, it depends on the issue to issue, but I try to firstly try to create as much awareness as I can. And I try to use topics which people commonly have interest in, and using that cover a broader issue. Supposing you're covering cricket, something happened in cricket, right? Using that, you can cover broader topics, because in cricket, most people of India are interested. Or if something has happened, let's say in Kashmir files recently, that where you can cover a lot of topics based on what that movie has done. You can cover what's happening in society. You can cover free speech. You can cover democracy. You can cover ecosystems which hide truth. You can cover how without publicity in the era of, again, social media or cinematic, that movie could break barriers. And that is all without discussing the main part of the movie, which is what happened to Kashmiri Hindus. That, of course, you have to discuss. But just using that, there are 20 topics you can cover. And that, I believe, at least on YouTube and Facebook, helps people to understand, because they are interested in that and they get additional stuff. Now, if you were to give a very dry lecture, like a professor, some professors very good lectures, I shouldn't ding them. But if you were to give a very dry lecture on free speech, I don't know, except academic, how many people would be interested in that? So the challenge is also to make it interesting to a person for whom it is not priority number one or concern number one. That is something, when you said what I try to do, that is something I try to do, cover a serious topic without getting too technical, so that more people can understand. In fact, I remember when I first went to debate, since I used to read a lot, you would sometimes use words which are not of common usage in English. And I learned it's better to use simpler words in English. This is, I'm talking about good when I was in school. And then that became a habit. And now in my brain, usually simpler words come, because what you keep doing becomes the way you live. So make it simple. Try to join it with a topic of wider interest to cover or carry out the point you want to carry out, is what I try to do. But of course, different people will do different things. But I think that works for what is my purpose.
Oh, thank you, sir. So what skills do you think have been essential for your success?
I will say about what skills I think are essential for success. People will have different answers. You could say confidence, you could say focus, you could say hard work, you could say perseverance. But I think if you have to narrow it down, in fact, I tweeted that a few days ago. If you have to narrow it down to one, and of course it's not one, it's a factor of a lot of them. But to make it simple, I think the most important skill is optimism. The ability to believe tomorrow will be better than today. The ability to sometimes ignore grim reality. The ability to ignore naysayers. If you have optimism that tomorrow is better than today, you will automatically work for it. Hard work would come. If you believe tomorrow is going to be better than today, you will automatically have the confidence that things will improve, and that confidence will reflect in how you do things. If you believe tomorrow will be better than today and you just need one break in any industry, in any profession you work in, just one break, that would lead to you having confidence that your time will come. Aapka time aayega. So that optimism, if you say any example, Abraham Lincoln, he lost so many elections in his life that he used to joke, or I think somebody joked about him, he couldn't be elected to the post of a dog catcher. And he became president, one of the most famous presidents in history, or one of the most famous democratic leaders in the history of the world, not only US, right? And if you go through his history, he lost election after election after election. Or you take example of anybody, Walt Disney. I think 200 or 300 times his Mickey Mouse was rejected. His first hit, he realized he didn't own intellectual property rights to it, and the producer owned everything. So you make those mistakes, you get a hit, but you make no money out of it because you don't own it. The IPR is owned by the producer. But he believed tomorrow would be better. And anybody who believes tomorrow would be better and has that confidence, no matter what the failure, no matter how grim the today, that person keeps working, and all the other aspects which are needed for success, I think, flow. But if you lose optimism, if you believe tomorrow is not going to be better than today, then you don't have confidence. And why would you work hard? If you think kal to isse bhi kharab hoga, why would you work hard? So to me, one thing most important and the toughest in difficult times is optimism.
So the next question is, how exactly do law and business go hand in hand in a broader sense?
I think they don't go hand in hand. They are like Siamese twins. You can't have a business without law. And I'll tell you the reason for it. Or let me go back again a little bit into history. When the colonial power was ruling us, see where their focus was. They wanted to make money for themselves. Their focus was where? They had uniform criminal laws. Your Indian Penal Code is 1860, right? And they had uniform contract laws, uniform commercial laws, Specific Relief Act, if anybody wants to Google, Indian Contract Act, Transfer of Property Act. The only field they left untouched was your personal laws, which we are having debates on Uniform Civil Code, but I don't want to digress from the topic because it's entrepreneurship, so leave that aside. But if they wanted to make money, what was the focus? Have law and order in place. So you need to have uniform criminal laws and have uniform civil laws, because only when it is guaranteed that contract has a value and that value would be respected, do you have a stable business environment. Otherwise, I contract with you, I don't pay you. I occupy your property, I don't vacate it. Business can't function. And in India, that's a struggle. In India, that is a major struggle. The amount of time our court cases take in commercial law is an enormous challenge, because without certainty of law, and in India, that's also a problem. That is governmental problem. Without certainty of law and without speedy execution of commercial laws, and we keep trying to do it. We brought in check bouncing 138 cases. We brought in amendments to it that if you file appeal or revision, you will have to deposit at least 20. But all those laws we are bringing, but the speed by which a businessman who gets into an entanglement or a family which gets into a litigation is often enough generational fight. That to business environment is extremely challenging. And so I won't say business and law go hand in hand. I say a business can't function without a very strong legal system which delivers, and delivers rapidly and delivers with a lot of certainty. Unfortunately, we really need to improve on that. Unfortunately, even government for that matter, sometimes for very, very petty cases, they will keep appealing it to the higher court and higher court. Why? Because the bureaucrat says, and I will tell you very frankly, a bureaucrat will say, if I don't appeal it, I could have an allegation of corruption that I didn't appeal it. And what do I lose by appealing? Nothing. And same in between people. There are very rarely, if in fact almost never, is cost paid. So a litigant who loses in one court or in two courts, he will keep appealing. He will keep appealing. Why should he not? Because there are no costs. And in this, I would blame, frankly, we lawyers are also guilty, because the lawyer will always advise to appeal because he says, why not? And if costs were imposed on the losing party, as is imposed in a lot of places, I think that would be meet with a lot of resistance on the bar. So yeah, that issue of better legal framework, not better, law is good, better certainty of law and better and faster resolution of any disputes which arise, that is a challenge India still faces.
Thank you, sir. So we have one final question. So in the domain of globalization, do you think we are going both forwards and backwards? We are collaborating with nations that are all around the globe. But at the same time, our economy is subject to a few superpowers, like the way you mentioned, other nations are selling their own products to us.
Interesting question. See, my view on globalization, let me start by one thing. Capital is cheap with those who have capital. Let's say US. The rate of interest a businessman gets money in US is 2%, 3%, right? In India, the rate of interest you pay on money is going to be 9, 10, I don't know the exact rate right now, maybe 11% or 9% or 10%. So it's 3 times or 4 times. This government has done a good job of trying to bring it down, but it's still going to be 3 to 4 times. So all the factors of production, capital they have cheap, and they want globalization in capital, that they can bring their money any part of the world. I mean, one tiny sliver of it. What does India have which is abundant? Labor. There is no globalization of labor. They won't give you a work visa or nothing, right? So globalization is inbuilt to favor the already prosperous. It is inbuilt, in my view, and the world system has become like that it will favor. And also, please understand, where we have left the colonial era, where you don't have, I'm not talking about India, I'm talking about in the context of many countries, where you don't have boots on ground to govern the country. But with the age of technology, if you control all the financial resources, if you control the policy making, IMF or World Bank will dictate to some country what their economic policy should be, and it happens very often, or what we are having, these debt crises being created by China. So if you control the decision on how to spend money and you can do it in real time, you don't need to be in any other country. Maybe 50 years down the line, we will need to understand, or people will study, because how absolute control of finances or policy making is also a form of controlling nations and deciding what sovereign nations could do without needing to be physically present in those nations in a large number. So you don't get the problems of that nation, but you do to a great extent get the prosperity of that nation. You have 1,000 stores. You don't need to be in every store if you are the CEO of a company. Is to a degree that what is happening with a lot of these policies that are being made? That's something we need to get into. To me, as I said, and I will now come to Indian perspective, solution lies in innovating things, creating things which the world requires of you. Otherwise, this globalization debate will make the already rich a lot richer. And it is a reality now. I don't foresee us going back to the era of isolation, or the world going into the era of isolation, or trade barriers, trade tariffs. Some of that during Trump era was spoken about. It didn't really materialize. But those are the wider debates at nation levels. At Indian level, I believe the solution, whether it is globalization world, or whether it is an isolation world, or whether it is a free market, or whether it is rigid trade barriers, whatever it be, are you innovating enough to become a superpower? Or are you using your own knowledge to at least be very prosperous? You will not become a superpower by yoga. You will not become a superpower by need. But at least you will be a very, very prosperous nation. And if you do innovate some great things, a new technological leap which we can't imagine, if it comes from you, if you create something in artificial intelligence which the world needs to adopt, then yes, amongst other things, that would herald you into a superpower era, which is what your aim should be. And in the very least, you become a very, very prosperous nation. That's how I see it.
Thank you so much, sir. I think we'll have to wrap up the session. Our team and I guess all the participants, I guess, have a lot to learn from today's session. And as an individual, I know for a fact that the amount of knowledge that I gained, like with the session today, was probably a lot more than I have ever learned in the past few months. So thank you, sir, for attending and gracing our event. And yeah, so thank you so much, sir. I think we will end the session.
Thank you.